Malaysia is an interesting country because it's a mix of so many different cultures. There's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons. The food is really good. I'm so happy that I have like priority pass because lounges in Asia are so good. There's always good Asian food. I don't have to eat before I go to the airport. I just eat at the airport. Infrastructure is surprisingly really good. It's funny because out of all the countries I've ever visited, this one is probably the closest to Latin America that I've seen. It's very similar to Puerto Rico, San Juan, and Medellin in a lot of ways. It's similar to San Juan because when you're driving around, you have this really warm tropical vibe. All of the lush greenery that you see when you're driving on the roads is exactly the same as it is in Puerto Rico. But then once you get into the city, all the architecture mixed in with the trees, I was reminded back in Medellin, the same forward-thinking architecture. It's very modern. There's a lot of unique buildings as well. So that was really interesting to see. Malaysia seems to be developing really quickly. There are a lot of new build projects, apartment buildings being built everywhere. And that's why I was surprised that the population was only 2 million, because when you see how many apartment buildings there are, it seems like there's a population of at least 4. But this is actually one of the pros of Malaysia. The fact that there's not a lot of people here makes it feel not super crowded. It's actually quite similar to Manila in a lot of ways too, but without all of the big negatives of Manila, such as the pollution, the crowdedness, the poverty. It does seem safer here in general, but there's a caveat to that, and I'm gonna touch on it in a little bit. The food is also gonna be hard for a lot of people because they use a lot of spice in their cuisine. And while it's really good and it's tasty, the heat mixed with a lot of the spicy food that you're gonna eat, you need some cooling stuff to help balance it out, or else you're gonna, like me, I break out on my skin a lot. Oh, when you're in heat, it's like a completely different rash that I get. I feel it like the way my stomach is, especially when I'm sleeping at night, just all the spices don't necessarily sit well. It's also very affordable. It's not quite as cheap as Vietnam, but it's not quite as expensive as the Philippines. It's kind of a nice middle ground. It's interesting because the wages here are higher than the Philippines and things are cheaper. The malls are also really well designed. There's so many beautiful malls all around the city. They carry a lot of the high-end designer brands, which is really good because that means that people feel safe buying expensive stuff here. And my friend has a Rolex and he walks around with the Rolex and he doesn't feel like someone's gonna jack it from him. So it has a similar vibe to Latin America because of climate and I guess because of vibe, but then without a lot of the crime, the safety issues, and a completely different culture. Because Malaysia is Muslim as well, it adds a very interesting element to the equation. I also like how diverse the country is. There's a big South Asian population, so Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, those guys, and they all kind of coagulate in certain areas, which leads to, unfortunately, some of the dirtiest areas of the city. Whereas you have luxury areas with the really big apartments, and there are like Indians and South Asians there, but it's mostly dominated from what I've seen by like the Chinese. There's a really big Chinese population here in Malaysia. It's assumed that the Chinese people have a lot of money. And there was an incident a few years ago where a lot of Chinese people got killed by the Malaysian people because they were seen as the enemies because they held all the money. So unlike Vietnam, you don't need to apply for a visa, but you do have to fill out a immigration form before you arrive to Malaysia, which you can find on their website. It's actually really easy to sign up. It only takes maybe like 5 minutes, but it's better to do it before you arrive so you can go straight through immigration. And I think it's really cool with like luxury lifestyles being so accessible. There's access to a lot of really good food. The Japanese food here is really good. There's a lot of really good Chinese food as well, a lot of good Indian food. And the nightlife is surprisingly good. And not necessarily in the sense where like you can go out and club and a bunch of stuff, but there's a bunch of really nice rooftop bars. The city is beautiful at night. The skyline is one of the best that I've ever seen in the world. There's just always something to do at night. Like if you're hungry at 2 or 3 in the morning, there are a bunch of restaurants open. There are a bunch of convenience stores still open. There are a lot of things open until really late at night, which is one of the things that I love about Asia. The sucky thing about Poland, especially Krakow, is that everything closes very late. So if you're trying to get some good food in the middle of the night at like midnight, you can only really get like pizza. Whereas in a lot of Asian countries, you can get a full, complete Asian meal, still cheap, all the street food, all the good flavor until late at night. And I think it's because it's so hot during the day that a lot of people turn into night owls. And me, as a night owl myself, is a schedule that I also really, really like. Now we gotta talk about some of the cons. Number one, the heat is horrendous. It's very hot and humid, so it's like a heavy heat. Probably on the same level as the Philippines, but it does feel a little more humid here. Like the heat hits you a lot more. There are some issues with safety. Unfortunately, at my hotel, I had money stolen from me from my bag. So I left my bag out at the pool accidentally. It was super late. I was really tired. I got a call in the middle of the night at like midnight that someone returned the bag to reception. And then when I got my bag back, all the cash was gone. Thankfully, they left the cards and my sunglasses were still there, but all the money that I had in the bag was gone. And then I went to reception asking them if like they could see CCTV or where did the money go. but they were just very unhelpful, very unresponsive. And I asked every day until I left. I had to leave for my flight this morning and we tried to resolve it, but got no answer. It seems that housekeeping stole the money, or somebody could have taken it while the bag was on the roof before it got turned in. But I don't know, because they were just very unclear with me with the answers. Even though the hotel itself was quite cool, the room wasn't really clean. I feel like I didn't really get what I paid for. The rooftop pool was really cool. The overall experience at the hotel, to be honest, was really poor. And this is similar to when I was in Malaysia the first time with my family. I remember specifically kind of this similar situation where we went to some theme park place in the mountains, and it was supposed to be like super fancy, really nice, but then we went into the hotel room and it was one of the dirtiest hotel rooms I've ever seen before. So that brings back another point where even though this country is quite clean, it's kind of a mixed bag where you get some areas, like the main areas where all the money is and all the nice buildings, it's very clean, but then you just walk a block over and then it's slummy again and you have a bunch of trash on the streets. It smells, and I think there is quite a difference between Chinese people, how they live, versus the South Asians and how they live, and you can see it. It's no coincidence that in the areas where there's a high population of the South Asians, it's just dirtier, it's a little more noisy, the vibe is just different. Granted, it's a little more lively, but I kind of felt like I was in a South Asian country. And on top of all of this, one of my friends was telling me that the police here are extremely corrupt. And it's one of those situations where they don't get paid enough for what they do, so they have to almost rely on bribes, and you get stopped for anything. They're easily paid off, and it's to the point where if you're a good cop, you get kicked out of the system. This is just what I've heard. I'm just reporting what I heard. That kind of reminds me of some places in Thailand is like that. The Philippines is like that too. So that level of corruption is unfortunate. Maybe as a tourist, we get treated differently than some of the locals, maybe for good, maybe for bad. But I think that has to be brought up as a major con. I don't like living in a place where I have to worry about the police stopping me. And maybe because like I'm East Asian looking, maybe I won't have like that bad of an experience. I don't know, like hearing those stories and hearing how they're all corrupt, that's what my buddy was telling me. It's kind of effed up. This is a really good place to live, but I don't think this is a place that's really exciting for a tourist. I mean, there's a lot of things to see, but you can see most of KL, like the important stuff in a day. Because it's so hot, you don't want to really be outside, so you're going to be spending a lot of time indoors in your apartment or at the malls. Very similar to the lifestyle in the Philippines, and to me, I like being able to walk around. The city is also not very walkable. You kind of have to take grabs to get everywhere, and I wish that you can take moto taxis to get anywhere, but those are illegal, so you have to take a car to get everywhere. Thankfully, there's not a lot of traffic here because the population is quite small. When there is traffic, or if your hotel is like in a random corner, I would have rather been able to take a moto taxi to get everywhere. That's something that I love about Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines. It's just a more efficient way to get everywhere, and it's a lot cheaper. My friend was also telling me that it's really easy to do business here, so I think that's a major pro. He was telling me because the labor is quite cheap, other people are more open to business, and maybe it's that Chinese influence as well. I think Kuala Lumpur was quite nice. It's not what I expected, but it was a major disappointment in some ways. Particularly after I got my money stolen, it put such a bad taste in my mouth that it kind of ruined the rest of the trip for me. But I met a couple of friends here that showed me around the city, and that was a really good time. Is it a place that I would live in? Probably not. It has so much potential, and I can see this blowing up in the future, but they still have to fix a lot of the smaller details. It's like they're on their way to be a developed country, but the culture hasn't caught up yet. And if I had to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably like a 7.5. So there's just some missing parts to it. And that's just kind of how it is now. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.